How would you like to have a place in your community where you could go for personal and professional development that would also improve the overall quality of life in your neighborhood, provide meeting spaces, enhance cultural engagement, support literacy for all ages, encourage community involvement, and be available to everyone, regardless of their socioeconomic circumstances? Well, you already have one of those places. It's called the community library. Libraries have a tremendous impact on the overall health of a community. That's why we're going to talk about libraries and their role in our society on today's episode of A Public Health Journal. Please stay tuned.
Welcome to A Public Health Journal, a program that explores public health issues facing our society today and tomorrow. The host of the show is Dr. Ed Ellinger, Commissioner of Health for the state of Minnesota. A Public Health Journal is sponsored by the Minnesota Department of Health and the Hennepin County Human Services and Public Health Department, all working together towards the goal of healthy people living in healthy communities.
Welcome to A Public Health Journal. Today we're going to talk about libraries, the role they have had in our communities, and their changing role in today's digital world. We'll see that today's libraries are much more than just a place to check out books. They are a place to help improve the health of our communities. Joining me in this conversation is Jennifer Nelson, Minnesota's State Librarian. Jennifer, welcome to our program.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
And I have to admit, I didn't know there was a state librarian. And so when I met you several months ago, I was just really enthralled with the idea of having a state librarian. How long have we had a state librarian?
Well, actually, Minnesota has had a state librarian since 1899. The legislature created a commission on libraries in 1899, and since that point we've had a commission or a group of folks who have been looking out for the health of primarily public libraries in Minnesota. It was in 1914 that a director was appointed to the State Library Commission, and from that point forward we've had an individual who's been recognized as the state librarian.
Yeah. And how long have you been state librarian?
I have been state librarian for 6 months.
All right, so happy 6-month anniversary.
Yes.
And
Thank
happy
you.
100th birthday for the state librarian.
Yeah.
And so what does the state librarian do?
Oh, that's a great question. The state librarian has a primary role with administering our state and federal funding programs for public libraries. So we oversee about $2.7 million in federal funding that comes through the state to support library services in Minnesota. And the state of Minnesota has several programs that provide funding for libraries, and we administer those as well. The state library also administers the Minnesota Braille and Talking Book Library, which is down in Faribault, Minnesota, which provides services to folks who are not able to use a library because of a physical impairment, usually blind or low vision.
Mm-hmm. So where are you located? Where's your offices? Sure. And what agency are you part
Sure.
of?
The State Library is part of the Minnesota Department of Education. So we're located in Roseville, and our situation within the Department of Education really fits for a library as a learning organization in a community. So it's a very nice way for the libraries to be represented in Minnesota through the agency of the Education Department.
Right, so you're in the Department of Education, but you work with all kinds of libraries, I
Yes.
assume. So,
Yes.
so tell me, how is our library system set up in Minnesota? How has it evolved over the years, and and kind of where are we now with the county libraries, city libraries?
Sure. Sure.
There are business libraries, there are school libraries.
Yes. There are all kinds of libraries, and in Minnesota we do have 360 public libraries. So in 360 communities in Minnesota you will find a public library, community library. Many of our schools have library media centers that help to support the educational aims of K-12 students. Almost all, in fact I would go on a limb to say all colleges, universities, community colleges have libraries as well that are supporting the academic mission of their institution. Corporations, nonprofits have libraries, so we have literally, I would say, probably about 1,500 libraries of all types in Minnesota. I forget the first part of your question.
Yeah, well, that's and so how are they connected? Are they connected in different ways?
Yep, they are connected. Minnesota has a very strong tradition of collaboration and resource sharing among libraries. So we have a sister organization called Minitex, which administers and runs resource sharing programs. So we have statewide interlibrary loans. So in most communities in Minnesota, you can go to your local library and request a book. And if the library doesn't own it, they will get it from another library in Minnesota for you, free of charge. We also have a system in Minnesota called the Electronic Library for Minnesota, which brings electronic resources, databases, journal articles, and that sort of thing to residents in the state. So we have a very strong structure of both public and academic school libraries that work very well together. We also have a system of regional public libraries and multi-county, multi-type library systems that sole purpose is to ensure that there is collaboration and coordination of services within counties, between counties, as well as statewide, as well as between types of libraries. So we have some really nice structures set up.
Who owns the libraries?
That's a great question. In Minnesota, typically public libraries are run by cities and counties. Cities and counties may choose to engage with a regional public library system to operate the libraries, but at the bottom line, public libraries are city and county library organizations, and they get most of their funding from the local funds.
Right, so I know recently, Minneapolis had a library system, and did they merge with the county, or how did that?
Yes,
Is that sort of how it's sort of evolving from city to potentially county, potentially regional?
Well, actually, that's interesting. In Minnesota statutes, counties are required or charged with providing library services. So at a basic level.
Oh, so it's a requirement.
Yeah. Counties provide it. Now, a county may not run a library. They may contribute as part of a joint powers agreement to a regional library system to operate a library, or they could have arrangements with cities to run libraries. So in the case of Minneapolis, the city of Minneapolis had its own library and own library board, and at a certain point there were concerns about the financial viability over time of the Minneapolis library, and they merged with the county library, and that has a little bit to do with where taxes come from and where taxes go to pay for it. So the Hennepin County Library, by absorbing the Minneapolis Library, moved from 26 locations to 41 locations in the county. So I wouldn't say there's a trend toward one way or another. Minnesota, one of the features of our library system is that the libraries are very diverse, and the way library services happen is different in every community, because libraries fundamentally are about the needs of the community and serving what the people need, and that happens a little bit differently in Warroad, Minnesota, as opposed to Rochester or Duluth.
Yeah, so there are, certainly in the health field, there are disparities that we have throughout the state, and access to care, for example, and access to service markedly different in rural communities. Is that the same with libraries?
Yes and no. There are libraries all over the state, and our regional system structure helps to ensure that there's equity of access and equity of resources. So our state funding programs are deliver resources to the libraries based on factors that include population, but as well as population square miles. So we're not providing proportionally more money to the metro area because it has more people. There is also a portion of the funding that accounts for how much land area are you serving, and the idea that if you're in northwestern Minnesota, you've got a lot of ground to cover as a library system, and so our funding programs reflect that. So, and certainly in all corners of the state, there are variations in services, but the core services are there in terms of being able to have a library, to check out books, to use electronic resources, to attend programs. One of the programs that the legislature provides funding for is the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund for Libraries. So that brings money for cultural and arts programming to all the libraries in Minnesota. So, so there is some disparity, but there's also a lot that's equal and accessible to people, again, based on what it is the community needs.
Good. Well, I want to talk about the roles that library plays in communities, but first we need to take a little break.
Okay.
We'll be back right after this message.
I'm a teacher. Let me tell you what I make. I make learning a privilege, not a chore, and frustration a tool, not an obstacle. I make working hard seem easy and giving up impossible. I make an old subject feel like a fresh thought and unconventional methods common. I'm a teacher. I make more.
Welcome back. We're talking about the role that public libraries play in Minnesota with Jennifer Nelson, who is the state librarian for the state of Minnesota. Jennifer, how much do libraries cost? Are they an expensive undertaking for communities?
They're a substantial investment. I guess I would consider it an investment rather than an undertaking. I actually don't have at the top of my head the average cost to run a library, but in Minnesota we do have a state law that requires cities and counties to pay a certain minimum amount for library services based on their prior how much they've spent in prior years. So I think we have a good substantial amount of support, and the amount varies from location to location just based on, you know, cost of salaries, cost of living in one area of the state is different than in other areas. So there's a lot of variation in how much is spent.
Mm-hmm. Now I know you talked about federal funding and state funding. How are libraries funded? What's the mix of sources of revenue that they use?
Sure, probably 75%, if not 75 to 85% is local funding. So it's city and county tax dollars, that are coming to support libraries, with a small portion that's coming from the state or the federal government, as well as many libraries have friends organizations that do fundraising and support for their libraries. So the bulk of it, though, is from local funding resources.
So whenever people talk about, you know, spending resources and in times when times are tough, what do you say to people? Say, what is the role of the library? What does it do to our community? Why do I need to have one in my community?
A library provides a lot of things for a community. Probably the most central role that a library has is in providing information and learning resources for the whole community without any barriers to access. So if you compare to community education, there's a lot of community programs in Minnesota. There's a cost, or there's a limit to what you can do with it. It's a 2-hour class once a week for 6 weeks. Public library typically is going to have very widely open hours. It's going to have a set of resources that are available free of all. The only thing we charge is if you don't bring your book back on time, we'll get a fine for that. But they really provide a solid place for people to go to look for information, to get answers to questions that they can't find on their own. And in many communities, the public library is the only place for free internet access. So if you're someone who doesn't have the resources to have home internet, you might have a mobile phone that lets you do a lot of things you need to do online. But if you're applying for a job and you don't have a computer at home, and most applications are moving online, where do you go? The public library. There's no charge, there's no requirement for access. You don't have to schedule a time, you can just come in and do it. Libraries, so they offer job support in that way. We do a lot of partnerships with other organizations that bring in additional resources. So in many communities, there are partnerships with the Service Corps of Retired Executives, which helps people to that are interested in starting businesses. We've got libraries that are doing job search sessions to helping people learn how to search for jobs. Of course, a lot of libraries provide homework support for young children, for school-age children. Increasingly, there's an opportunity for libraries to engage in maker spaces. So we provide really a central place in any community for a whole variety of needs to be met. During last fall, many libraries were locations for Affordable Care Act training and for getting people information on how to sign up. We're, stop short of signing people up, but to provide that place of where do you sign up online. You don't have a computer at home and you can't do it on your phone. You can do it at a public library.
So they do a lot more things than just check out books.
Oh, far more.
So
more.
What skills does a librarian need these days?
Sure, I would say the primary skill a librarian needs today is communication skills and relationship building, to both work with library patrons who may have special needs that require a level of sensitivity or awareness of the challenges that a person might have to getting information and using technology. Certainly using technology is a huge part of being a librarian. It's a little bit of an inside joke within the library community. After Christmas rolls around, you get hundreds of people coming in with new ebooks and ebook readers and needing to know how to set up their iPad or their Kindle or their Kobo reader to use the library's free electronic books. So there is a need for some of that technology knowledge. Libraries are actually one of the organizations in the U.S. that used computers before many other organizations. We've used computers as a backbone for our services since the early 1960s. So libraries have always had a role with technology that I think people don't really see. Libraries also need to know how to build partnerships to work with community partners to address common goals. If you think about the need for homework support, need to be working with schools, with other community organizations that are providing similar services to make sure that we're making the best use of our resources to support student achievement.
Have there been studies that show the impact that libraries have had in communities and in places where they haven't had libraries?
Well, that's a great question because there are so many libraries that you really can't talk about where there isn't a library. The statistic that we like to talk about is that in the United States there are 17,000 public libraries and 14,000 McDonald's. So if you think about the market share where libraries are, we're everywhere. Or as the commercial used to say, we're everywhere you want to be. So I haven't seen any studies that talk about communities that don't have libraries because most communities do have a library.
Now, didn't Carnegie put a lot of dollars into libraries 50, 60,
100 years ago? 100 years ago. In fact, Minnesota has, I think, 58 Carnegie-supported libraries. So yes, the Carnegie Foundation provided wonderful support and built some beautiful buildings throughout the country, and especially in Minnesota, to provide that core set of resources for a community. And in those days, many libraries were talked about as the learning organization. So the People's University, where do you go if you can't afford college? You don't know that college is available, and maybe you just emigrated to the country and you don't know what the opportunities are. The public library is the place where you get that. If you fast forward 100 years, the Gates Foundation has provided a similar role for libraries in supporting technology infrastructure. So for about 10 or 15 years, the Gates Foundation has provided a lot of financial resources to libraries to build computer labs so that libraries can provide free and open access to technology and the internet for library customers.
Good.
So.
Well, we've got a lot more to talk about. We need to take one little break first. I'll be back right after this message.
In Minneapolis, St. Paul, we have the largest Somali population in the United States, the largest Hmong population, and now the largest population of Karen refugees.
Karen people from Burma. Since 1984, we are not get along with the Burmese government, so we have to live in a camp in Thailand, and then we become a refugee.
A lot of people came here and they thought, well, it's really cold, but there are jobs and the schools are good, and people can make this place their home. But we need to make sure that we're all experiencing the same benefits. It's what'll continue to make us strong as a community. In 2009, the St. Paul Public Library experienced a large increase in the number of people needing updated computer skills and needing help with job search. What St. Paul needs is a space for learning. So we started the mobile workplace. We are trying to go places where there are fewer barriers for people to come. The mobile workplace has many more students who are looking to start from the very beginning. This is how you turn it on. This is how a mouse works or a touchpad. The basic vocabulary about how computers work. And then we progress to a web search, signing up for your first Gmail address, how to get from one place to another. You know, there are a lot of people who don't see pictures of their country, and now they can do a search and look at the images, and then it's like a flood of stories. We give our students the tools and the access and the knowledge that is ultimately going to be a benefit to them, but also to us as a community.
For me, I'm not a Burmese citizen. I'm not a Thai citizen, and I want to see my children become citizens.
We're not in the book business. We are in the St. Paul business. And my hope is that somehow we strike that spark and we can ultimately make their lives a little better and make our city better.
Welcome back. We're talking with Jennifer Nelson, who's the state librarian. Jennifer, we have just a few minutes left, and there's a lot of stuff to talk about libraries, but I really want to talk about how they're changing. You know, we know that it used to be books in a library and a bookmobile every once in a while, but now with the digital world, with computers, everything is virtual, or not everything, but lots of things. How are the libraries changing, and how are they adapting to this new digital world?
Well, You know, libraries are changing in a lot of different ways. Part of it is how we're investing in staffing and how we're really building the capacity to work with people around technology needs. Some of it is figuring out what's the 21st century bookmobile. So if you think about a bookmobile, in fact, Minnesota back in 1899 had a set of traveling libraries, so a traveling set of books that were chosen by the state that went from location to location to ensure library service. Well, today, if you look at mobile library services, you see a wide range of things. The St. Paul Public Library, which we just saw, has a mobile workforce lab where they load up a small car with computers and take it to community locations where people are underserved, where they don't have access to resources. They may have barriers, including limited English language proficiency. So they've hired individuals who speak languages like Karen or Somali to go into the communities to work with people around core basic digital literacy skills. So the issue of digital library skills is probably the single area where libraries are making some huge efforts and some huge changes. If you think about literacy in the 21st century, it was about reading. Today, it's about reading plus technology and plus the use, knowing how to use a computer to get what you need, whether it's applying for a job, reading a book, or any other, communicating with friends and family, which is an important part of health. Libraries are also really moving into a role as a community learning space. So where in the past we've always had meeting rooms where people could come in and book a room to have a meeting of a group, libraries are now taking a more central role in that and really seeking out community partners. The Rochester Public Library, for example, has some nice health programs where they're bringing in health professionals. In some cases it's volunteers from maybe a nursing school that'll do preliminary health screenings for people. So we're really reaching out into the community to bring people in and finding different ways to go out into the community to provide services. We're really, I think, also looking, probably the huge question on the equation is what's going to happen to books. We know printed books, the ones that are printed now aren't going to go anywhere. We're going to retain collections of printed books, but as we move forward, what is the publishing world going to do? Is all books going to move online so that the only option you have for books that are coming out to have them electronically? I think that's a little far-fetched, but it's also, we're closer to that than I probably would have thought. The number of ebooks checked out in libraries over the last year doubled. Now it's still only 5% of the total circulation of library books, but a doubling in a year is quite significant. So we're really...
You know, now, also, our population is changing. You know, we now have lots of people of color, American Indians, changing population dramatically, limited English. You talked a little bit about that. I suspect there are a lot of people, immigrants coming from cultures where libraries weren't in existence or really weren't known very much. How do you educate folks about the importance of libraries and how to use them?
Well, libraries, they demonstrate their value by providing the value. So in the city of Minneapolis, for example, the Franklin Library, when Hussein Samatar moved to Minneapolis, one of his first connections was with a librarian at the Franklin Branch Library, and he was really able to see the value that the library brought him and his family, and word spread throughout the community, so that the Franklin Library now is a hub for the Somali community in terms of obtaining access to resources. So much of what we do is word of mouth, and when folks who are coming in from another culture are asking friends and family who've been here for a while, where do I go, how do I get what I need, the tip of people's tongues is go to the library. We also get a lot of referrals from social service organizations that are working with people to do settling for immigrants and that sort of thing. We'll refer people to libraries knowing that we are a resource that's stable, we're there, we're not going anywhere, and we have a solid infrastructure, so we get a lot of word of mouth referrals that way. And then libraries, particularly in the metro area, are really adapting by hiring staff members who speak native languages who can actually take an active role in going out to work with community organizations to visit housing sites where there may be a predominant population of folks who from another culture, to really extend the word of what libraries can do. And then as soon as we start to provide services, that's the bingo. People start to see the value and that they can get things from a library that they can't get elsewhere.
So do you still need a library card?
You still need a library card. That is one of the fundamentals. You don't need a library card to walk into a library, but if you want to take books out of a library, you will need a library card, and that's a way that we help to track and measure the success of what we're doing, is by being able to count the number of people that come in, the number of people that have library cards, the number of books that get checked out, and we do have an accountability to our funding organizations for how our resources are being used. And having a library card is, we tell people, it's like having a credit card. There's a value to it that maybe seems a little far off, but it's very much there. So.
But when you can come in, you can use all of the resources there without a card.
Yep, you sure can.
And
you
so
sure can.
just in the last minute or so that we have, what do you see the future in hold for libraries?
You know, I think the future for libraries is very exciting. The more that we're able to connect with community organizations and demonstrate that we have the space and the people available to support common mission and common goals, the future is kind of limitless in terms of really demonstrating the place that we have in helping a community move forward, helping individuals in the community meet their personal needs, but also the community as a whole to strengthen itself to move forward on whatever the community goals are, whether it's redevelopment in a distressed economic area or improving the overall health of a community by ensuring that anybody has an opportunity to make social connections that are so important to health.
Do people generally support libraries?
Generally, yes. The Pew Research Organization does studies every couple of years on libraries, and I think upwards of 80% find their libraries either good or very good. Right. So, well, yes, tremendous support.
Well, Jennifer,
We're very
this has
grateful.
been fascinating. Libraries are an important part of our community. They certainly add a lot to the health of our community. So thanks for being here. Thanks for being the State Librarian.
Well, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
I look forward to working with you in the future.
Great. Thank you.
And I'll be back with a closing comment right after this message.
I come from a big family. I'm the oldest of 6. To me, being the first person to go to college, it's like setting a standard, you know? My little brother is 8 years old now. I challenge his curiosity. I challenge him to dream. I have to paint a picture for him that he can look up to and live up to and possibly be better than. My name is Jaquez, and I am your dividend.
When I was a practicing pediatrician, I would ask 3 questions of every parent. Does your child know how to swim? Have you visited the state capitol? And do you and your child have a library card? You may wonder what those questions have to do with health of a child. Well, knowing how to swim should be obvious. It's a life-saving skill. It fits in the same category as wearing your seatbelt and bicycle helmet and looking both ways before crossing a street. It's a personal behavior that protects you from harm. Visiting the Capitol, on the other hand, highlights the community aspects of health. We all live in a community, and the health of our community affects our health. Only by actively participating in how our communities are built and governed will we be able to assure that our communities are healthy. Engaged communities are healthy communities. The library card is about opportunities. It offers the opportunity for education and learning, for growth and development, for exploration and discovery. A library card provides opportunities to examine the past, explore the present, and create the future. The library card is also about dreams. It stimulates dreams about the future, about possibilities, about a child's place in the world. Kids need to know how to swim. They really should visit the Capitol, but most of all, they need to dream and have the opportunities for those dreams to come true. Does your child have a library card? That's all for today. Thanks for watching. I hope you can join us again next time on A Public Health Journal.